March may hold some legal madness for former President Trump. His former lawyer, Michael Cohen, appeared before a Manhattan grand jury this week. The adult film actress Stormy Daniels, whose real name is Stephanie Clifford, also met with prosecutors. Both are related to those hush money payments. During the 2016 presidential campaign, Mr. Trump could soon be facing criminal charges related to that probe. Trump's lawyers have denied he did anything illegal in that one. At the same time, he's also potentially on the verge of facing charges in Atlanta after an initial grand jury reportedly recommended multiple indictments in a case stemming from his pressure to overturn Georgia's 2020 election results. Grand jurors told the Atlanta Journal-Constitution that they also heard another phone call that featured the former president leaning on a Georgia official to overturn the state's presidential election. All of this on top of the special counsel Jack Smith's wide-ranging probe of the former president's actions tied both to the insurrection and his handling of classified documents. Will any of this impact his presidential campaign? For any other candidate, the answer would be of course. For former President Trump, get your shrug emoji out, because who the heck knows? Joining me now on set is Tamara Keith, White House correspondent for NPR, Democratic pollster, NBC News political analyst Cornell Belcher, and Republican strategist Brad Todd. Tamara, let me start with you. Is it news to people if Donald Trump is indicted on anything? And I say this, and I'm not trying to be cynical about it, but it's like, what is that oh my God, somebody check your phone, what do you see this? Or is it going to be of course it is?
Well, liberal legal talking heads have been predicting this moment for like 5 or 6 years. But it may actually happen, and I think that it is hard to predict exactly what the impact of that will be. Like, are indicted is different than just like are running for president or are complaining about a witch hunt. It could be different for some voters, probably not for all voters, because the search of his Mar-a-Lago property ultimately helped him in the polls, at least for a while, with people who were sort of rallied around him. And you could certainly see there being sort of a Republican loyalty test around who's going to come forward and say, well, this wasn't fair or this was a witch hunt. And I think also it kind of depends on which of these cases ripens and which one would lead to an indictment.
Well, and that's what I want to... Brad, does accumulation matter?
To some extent, because exhaustion is one of President Trump's enemies. Although I will say the higher profile these cases are in the news, the more it helps him. The lower profile they are in the news, the more it hurts him, because it's a smolder that hurts him.
Stormy Daniels probably helps him. The Georgia case, which nobody seems to ever hear about, might hurt him?
Yes.
Is that your mindset?
I think higher profile things will cause Republicans to rally to him. But if it's just a low smolder, it's just more exhaustion. It also matters somewhat about Ron DeSantis, right? When Trump was one of one, when he was the only thing of his kind, a lot of voters felt like they had the choice between him and conventional politicians. If that's not the case, then suddenly you have the luxury of being irritated by a lot of this stuff for Trump voters.
Cornell, I know you don't advise many Republicans, but if you were advising somebody running against Trump, would you advise them to bring it up or just run against something else on him right now?
Well, I'm of two minds here. One is, it's like Macbeth, it's all is foul and all is fair. We're actually on the set having a conversation about whether or not it's a good thing or a bad thing for a candidate to be indicted.
Well, did you see the polling that two-thirds of Republicans believe that the Democrats and Washington Republicans were in cahoots to get rid of Donald Trump?
Well, yeah, and by the way, that's his base. But I'm going to go on the record here, Chuck, and I'm going to say that if the president's indicted, if there's a criminal case against the president, it is not a good thing in a general election for a president.
I think that's
it's
a fact.
not a good thing.
Brad, do you concur with that?
I agree.
Yeah.
It's not a good thing in a general election with independents.
But first, there's a primary.
Now that, all bets are off on that. But if I were... It's not about whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. It's just good campaign strategy 101. If, in fact, Ron DeSantis or Ron DeSanctimonious is, in fact, trying to be the alternative to Trump, absolutely, I say as close to Trump as I possibly can. And not let an ounce of daylight between me and Trump on most of the issues.
That does seem to be that. I mean, this Ukraine, to look at his Ukraine position, it does look like he's basically saying, I'm not letting Trump get to the right of me on anything. Is that what you're sensing?
I think it is. And I think, most Republican hawks will look at Ron DeSantis' longer record and say, well, he's been a hawk for almost his entire career. And
do you think they'll don't worry, he's just saying what he has to say?
I also think we shouldn't miss this moment that Joe Biden has made it very hard for Republicans to stay with him in coalition on Ukraine. He's not waged the war in the way Republicans wanted him to. He's always 6 weeks behind or 6 months behind.
Just heard John Bolton complain about this.
And he also talks about the war in different terms. And he sends pension money to Ukraine. He talks a lot more about preserving the Ukraine than he does about defeating Russia. Republicans are willing to help any president defeat Russia and deal a blow to Russia. He doesn't say that.
You got to let me in on this, Chuck. I just can't let this
Go ahead, because I've heard this critique. I've heard this critique, and I want to talk.
He has it in a way that Republicans can stand with him. Which Republicans? Because if I listen to the House Republicans, a lot of the House Republicans in their leadership, they're literally saying what Ron DeSantis is saying and arguing that we in fact
a year later.
I don't care that we're in fact spending too much. If I listen to Mitch McConnell, all of a sudden they're not with where Ron DeSantis is, and they're a lot more with where the president is. So this idea that there's a Republican coalition of one mind on this war is just not factual.
No, there's about 40% of Republicans who agree with.
But Tamara, I want to actually go.
About 100% want to defeat Russia. They're not convinced Joe Biden's doing this.
I can't tell that in the House.
But there is one thing that I think we all would agree on, is that Joe Biden doesn't sell this war to the American public. When he talks about this war, he goes to Poland. Right? He has not done it here. And of all the critiques I've heard from Republicans that are frustrated about the poll numbers, the hawkish Republicans that sit here and say, and you start to look, over time, you're starting to see more people are getting exhausted from how long this has taken. I know they're of a different, do they at all acknowledge that maybe they need to have a more robust domestic sales pitch for this war?
I think I've asked about that numerous times in the briefing, and the answer is that they're not worried about it.
I know they're not.
Yeah. And they're, they do a very good job of projecting confidence. That's the thing that the Biden White House does with regularity.
He cares more about the opinion of Berlin socialites than he does about Republicans in the U.S. House. And it's Republicans in the U.S. House who will have to authorize any more funding for weaponry. Biden, he has to accept that that's the case.
How long did it take you to come up with that metaphor? That was a pretty good one.
It's the truth. It's the truth.
But I go back to, I think the dilemma here, Cornell, is this. You never win a political argument making a domestic case for foreign intervention.
No.
I get that.
No, absolutely not.
But I do think it is fair to say that he hasn't sold this as well domestically.
Well, he's only 24 hours a day. And guess what? If the president was spending 80% of his time talking about the Ukraine, guess what my friend would be attacking him on? He'd be attacking him on, why is he focused on inflation?
Actually,
why isn't he focused on the economy?
As someone said to me, the only thing he's focused on every morning is the war. This is what is, he knows this is the defining issue.
Because that's a big thing.
Right. He knows it's the defining issue of this presidency right now.
But he's not going to win or lose, but he's not going to win the presidency.
I understand that as a political argument.
He shouldn't have to wait on the Germans to authorize Leopard tanks before he authorizes Abrams. If he wants to win the war, he needs to go and authorize weaponry to win the war.
Well, I get both sides of that from the Republicans in the House, because some of them say we're doing too much, some of them say we're not saying we're doing enough. So it's a flip-flop. Get Republicans in the House straight on what, in fact, we should be doing.
I guess let me ask the question this way, Tamara. Yeah. Given where DeSantis is now suddenly on the war, do they not see an opportunity here to drive a wedge in the other party?
There is a wedge there to be driven.
Correct. Like if they would go in there, they just have to look. They need a tack hammer. They don't even need a sledgehammer on this one.
Because there is a very real debate within the Republican Party, and I think Ron DeSantis is a perfect example of this. Are they the pro-business party, pro-defense party that they used to be, or are they the party that thinks that defense should be on the table for cuts, and that Mickey Mouse is a threat, and that is like a real tension within the party. The White House does not seem that excited about drawing that out at this moment. Right. They seem more interested in focusing on what Mitch McConnell is saying.
Brad, are you concerned about a wedge? Forget what you think of the Biden White House right now. Do you think your party's vulnerable to have a wedge driven into it on this issue?
I would say that foreign policy, the modern Republican Party has always had an isolationist corner to it. It always looks bigger when the United States is not directly threatened. As soon as the United States is directly threatened, You see how tiny
Yeah.
it is. And I think the same thing will happen here. You know, if instead of a drone that had been knocked down by a Russian plane yesterday, that was an American plane, you'd see every single elected Republican being all for going after the Russians. And so some of this is just a waxing and waning with the directness of the threat that Russia is engaging in on the ground right now.
Do you think there's some of this, though, that is, you know, it's funny, J.D. Vance accused Democrats of being hawkish on Russia only over the 2016 election, which, of course, then I wanted to say, well, is your dovishness on Russia only because of the 20? I mean, I can't help but see, you can't help but wonder how much of the politics of Russia from 2016 actually has some impact on some of these passive Republicans.
But I think it goes even further than that. Look, I would hope that you're right. Once upon a time in this country, I think that you're right. But if I look at what is the Republican National Committee's #1 sort of branding, and that's Fox News, every night they are Putin sympathizers on Fox News.
Well, and we have seen a little bit of that show up in polling every now and then. Tamara, Cornell, and Brad, thank you. Hope your brackets are still intact.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.